how did you get from I moved to Japan to, damn, I'm really passionate about this new category of spirits to meet new to you, you know?
Well, fortunately, I had a vessel for getting to Japan. I was in education, and I had taught in the States, and then I ended up didn't really jive with me, and I ended up in Korea and moved in down the street from my future wife. She befriended one of my colleagues at the school, and then the rest is kind of history. But she wanted to move here. I moved here with her. I thought we were going to be here for 1 year. I took great pleasure in finally having access to good sake, because in the 90s in America, that stuff was garbage. I mean, nobody knew how to handle it. People treated sake in America like it was a spirit. They would open the bottle and then just leave it on the shelf for months and then pour for the next customer. It was like vinegar. We called it dirty socks. But I got to Japan and in 2002 and was delighted to find that that was all just wrong. And I spent a couple of months just slowly plowing through what I could find. And then one day, while I was at it's called an izakaya, Izakaya, which is a Japanese gastropub. Basically, it's a bar that does food reasonably well. Mm-hmm. And they're everywhere. Izakaya are just like the name of the game over here. And it was very sake centric, but unbeknownst to me, the guy had several ShōChū behind the counter, and it was raining, so I was the only guy in there. So he's like, let's mess with the gringo. And he put out a couple of ShōChū in front of me for the first time in my life. I had never heard of the category before. Yeah. And it just ruptured my entire life's path. I was shocked. I was like, this is not sake. And I didn't speak any Japanese at that time either. What is this? And he's like, it's ShōChū. And I had lived in Korea for 2 years. So I was like, I know what soju is, SOJU. Is this soju? He's like, no, completely different. I was like, okay. So what are we talking about here? He's like, it's ShōChū, try it. And I tried a barley ShōChū. I was like, wow, that's really interesting. He's like, oh, you don't hate it. Let's find something that you're not going to like. So he turned around and he brought me a sweet potato ShōChū, which is just like off the charts, different planet, both clear as water, but so I wasn't ready for it. Yeah. And I smelled it and I protested. I was like, there's no way that's ShōChū. If the first one's ShōChū, that's not ShōChū. They were so radically different. It really almost upset me because I was like, okay, I understand this is a joke. It's almost like he put Malort in front of me after giving me like a glass of Chardonnay. It was that different. You know what I mean? Yeah. And then he gave me a buckwheat ShōChū, and he gave me a rice ShōChū, and he gave me a kokuto sugar ShōChū. All clear as water, all completely different.
What are they? Because I was thinking that they were all rice-based spirits, but that's not the case, because you just said sweet potato, you said barley, you said rice. What is ShōChū?
ShōChū is the most diverse spirit on the planet. It can be made from, by Japanese tax law, 53 approved ingredients, and they're Koji. And while sake, Japan's most famous export, at least in whiskey's now very famous too, but historically the most famous thing in terms of alcohol that was exported from Japan, that's always made from rice and only rice. Yeah. Rice is also an approved ingredient for ShōChū, but it's one of many. Okay. And so the most popular two styles in Japan are barley and sweet potato. Okay. And number 3 is rice. Number 4, I think, by sales volume is probably buckwheat. And then there's sesame ShōChū, there's kokuto sugar ShōChū, there's some weirdos like water chestnut ShōChū, kelp, cactus, all sorts of things that are regional agricultural products. No fruit, really, but grains, tubers, leaves, and everything in between. And because there's
what connects them? What connects them into that one category?
Okay, so the aside from the restrictions on ingredients, well, there's more restrictions, but one of them is they must be made with Koji, fermented with Koji. Koji is Japan. This is incredibly sexy, so wait for it. Japan's national mold.
Okay.
Now, the beautiful thing about this is that without this mold, Japanese cuisine as we know it would be unrecognizable. So this mold, Koji, Koji, is used to make soy sauce, miso, 100% of sake, mirin, 100% of shochu, awamori, pretty much all the other spirits in the country with the exception of most whiskey. Everything delicious that's made in Japan and fermented pretty much is made with Koji. So
Wow.
it is the magic behind the savory umami notes of Japanese cuisine. And one of the reasons why they can focus so much on individual ingredient by ingredient, because they have this magic savory note that they can add to things. It is an underappreciated aspect of Japanese cuisine that now, fortunately, chefs around the world are starting to use it in their menus. So you're starting to see Koji everywhere. And that's made it a lot easier to talk about it. It is a mold. It's a filamentous mold that is completely harmless and very tasty, and does very fast-acting starch conversion and helps to create very efficient fermentations if you're talking about beverage alcohol. And it's used to make 100% of shochu and awamori.
Gotcha. And
now,
then
that's one of the requirements. That's one of the required ingredients, in addition to those 53 I mentioned before. A couple of other things. You start a fermentation. So let's just imagine a rice fermentation. The starch conversion is not malted grains. It has to be this kojified, this mold propagated on the rice. So it takes the place of malted grains like in whiskey and beer. And then whatever you have from that fermentation, you distill one time in a pot still, which is incredibly rare. And then you can't add any additives ever. There's no additives allowed. It's just approved ingredients and their Koji, water, yeast, and time. That's it. Time, not Thyme. And that's pretty much it. It's on paper, very simple. In reality, very hard to do well.
Sure. And then how is, before we get into the business of this, which is really will be the meat and potatoes, awamori, what is that and how is that different?
Awamori is Shochu's aunt. It's several generations older. Was started in Okinawa Prefecture, which is as far southwest in Japan as you can get before you hit Taiwan. And it's a rice spirit, always rice. Even people in Japan don't realize that. They think it's made from sugarcane. It's not. It never is. It's not allowed. It's rice with black koji. It's one specific strain that is indigenous to the southern islands called Koji, literal translation, black koji. Single pot distilled, like shochu, no additives, tends to be very vegetal, mineral forward, a little bit of a good mushroom quotient to it. They will cut it 50-50 with mineral water, pour it over ice, and drink a lot of it with dinner.
Yeah.
Kind of like a wine, almost.
What proof, give or take, like we think in America, a whiskey is like 80 proof, right? So that's about 40% alcohol by volume. Yep. Wine is usually, I think, 12 to 16%, give or take. Beer's like 4 to 8. What are these spirits from an alcohol content perspective?
Max allowable level by Japanese tax law is 90 proof. And that's actually, it has to be under 90 proof. So under 45% is the max allowable ABV. Now, most shochu, anyway, is bottled at 25 because until relatively recently, historically, the tax would bump up at 26% ABV. So everybody bottled at 25. And even after they eased that, they kind of they discontinued that tax bump. Still, to this day, everybody just drinks 25. And awamori is typically bottled at 30, but higher proof expressions are not uncommon, especially today as people are getting more into the craft aspect of these drinks. So 43, 44 is not uncommon. But, the higher you go, the more tax is added. So a lot of it is at 25. And it works really well there. I don't know if the tax authorities were really thinking about how nice it tasted, but 25 tends to work. So it's not horrible.